Hi, welcome. The As you can see, the books are still scattered, but I've arrived home. The drive for work was eventful as a day could be. And around lunchtime, I drove to Hy-Vee, and between the checkout aisle and one of the bags of chips I was looking at, I scrolled through YouTube and saw the comments on the most recent video. So thank you. And it is good to see you again. It's good to see you all again. I'm speaking conceptually, right? I can't see you. But I appreciate the reaching out. And I read the comment from, I believe, a new subscriber who outlined their movement from Kierkegaard to Christos Yannaras, and in the wake of which recommending the translation by Mr. Norman Russell, which I am reading from. I must say, as you were typing those things, or as you left the comment, reading it subvocally to myself between those chips in the aisle of Hy-Vee, I said to myself, these are my thoughts. They echoed how I think about Kierkegaard, and one of the reasons why I was so enthusiastic about him. So now the second paragraph in the author's preface, which came about 2 decades after his publication of this book. This book was published at the tail end of the 1960s, and the author's preface was written in the early 90s, a few years after I was born. And here is the second paragraph. The ontological question, or the problem of being, are verbal expressions of a latter date, which nevertheless draw attention to one of the starting points of philosophical thought, our reference to the reality of being, i.e., to that which exists, with regard specifically to the attribute of existence. What does it mean to exist before any other defining characteristic? We call the ontological question our perplexity about the reality or fact of being, about participation in existence, beyond the mere phenomenicity of that which exists. It is a question about existence as the common constitutive element or presupposition of that which exists, being in itself, apart from the limitations of space, time, decay, and death. End paragraph. The ontological question, or the problem of being, are verbal expressions of a latter date. So already here, he's hinting at a theme which he will develop later and in the midpoint of the book. And that theme is the following. Verbal constructions, verbal expressions are not the same thing as the material. Now, I know that sounds like disappeared in the middle space between the screen, the green dot, and my lips. Words, 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 as Hamlet said in his response to Polonius, when Polonius was asking him with a book in hand, what are you doing? Words, words, words. But again, what makes philosophy at its best non-conventional and beside the point is the fact that it takes its time with distinctions. It takes its time in kneading the dough of distinctions or of distinction. So, verbal expressions of a latter date, which nevertheless draw attention to one of the starting points of philosophical thought. Now, already, Mr. Yannaras in the second paragraph is echoing the implied statement of the first paragraph from the previous video. Now, the implied statement from the previous video in the first paragraph was there is more than one manner of responding to the ontological question. In Mr. Yannaras' case, he's responding to the question with a rational method and order. You could paint paintings responding to the ontological question. You could make coffee responding to the ontological question. You could go for a walk, long or short, responding to the ontological question. Kierkegaard would say you could get married, responding to the ontological question, or not get married, responding to the ontological question. You could lock the door behind you at a monastery, responding to the ontological question, or you could stare out the ivory window of a tall tower in academia, responding to the ontological question. Or you could look up from the bucket with suds popping up at you and an electric bulb flashing overhead and a long hallway and many hours into the night and early morning, responding to the ontological question. In other words, it doesn't matter which route you take, or does it? This too is a question beside the point, and hence philosophical. In this second paragraph we are looking at now, he echoes this many and one, this multiplicity and unity concern. Where does he do it? I would say he does it here. Nevertheless, draw attention to one of the starting points of philosophical thought, as if to say there is more than one starting point of philosophical thought. So just as there are many ways to respond to the ontological question, there are many starting points of philosophical thought. Maybe it was the way that one flower looked in the geranium or in the vase one day when you were 14 years old. Maybe it was learning a second language. Maybe it was seeing the giant on the WWF take Hulk Hogan by the throat and lift him up, brother, and throw him down in the middle of Madison Square Garden. In this, set you on fire with its starting point. Set you on fire for philosophical thinking. Hello, Max. Thank you. Good to see you too. Yannaras continues. What does it mean to exist? Before any other defining characteristic. Let's slow down. It's posh to say, what does it mean to exist? We're on the right-hand side in the timeline of Jean-Paul Sartre in the 1950s. Who doesn't know how to ask the question, what does it mean to exist? With a sort of unkempt world weariness that we can slap together while we lift our coffee at a cafe. We've learned how to do this after world wars. In other words, we've learned how to be ironic about important matters. Maybe as a way of protecting ourselves, protecting our history. Who knows? What does it mean to exist before any other defining characteristic, such as my blonde hair, my brown hair, my long hair, my short hair, the fact that I have to wear glasses? What is existence before my physical therapy? We call the ontological question our perplexity about the reality or fact of being, about participation in existence beyond the mere phenomenicity of that which exists. Now, a lot of words here. But what I want to bring out and then close this video is his use of the word perplexity. We call the ontological question. Notice he hasn't even given the ontological question a signified. It's like saying the zoo in Omaha, Nebraska. Yes, yes, yes. I understand the category. There are animals. They're behind cages. I'm sure there's something representing the ocean, something representing the desert, something representing the rainforest. But I want specifics, not genera or generalities. And in this way, he is beating around the bush, dancing around the bush, setting the bush on fire. He's referring in different ways to the ontological question, but he's not giving it specific content yet. It's the preface to the 4th edition. He's giving himself room. And let's give ourselves room. We call the ontological question our perplexity. So I was thinking yesterday, in this corner of the internet, often we talk about, directly or indirectly, complexity. And the more engineering-minded individual might speak of complexity in terms of the possibilities of robotic movement and programming thereof. And the rehearsal of such a world that is complex ad nauseum is the following, runs in the following way. Everything I could look at forever, because I never would exhaust its detail or details. Slow down. As I was walking up the staircase to my floor in the apartment, knowing I had to do laundry, I said to myself, is that true? Is that true? Is the world that complex? Conceptually, maybe, but ontologically, is it so? The significance of asking the ontological question is lies in the attempt, more so than in the result. What do I mean? If we're going to do it right, then by asking the ontological question, we are going to try and clear away our conceptions, our preconceptions. We're trying to apprehend the real as it is for us, with us, without resorting to conceptions, concepts, ideas, convention. Because wouldn't it be nice, wouldn't it be better to go to the ocean and deep sea dive, to go to the rainforest and cut with your own machete, to walk through the desert and find the scorpions, than to go to the zoo in Omaha and look at something behind thick glass? Sometimes we have to look at the world through thick glass. But the ontological question challenges us to take our time, to step back and wait for what arises. So, complexity already assumes a concept that is amenable to robots, computers, something that requires codes to tell it whether to turn right or left, to look up or look down, or remain stationary. I'm at 18 minutes. I need to wrap this up. Rather than think about the complexity of the world, why don't we ask, what is the perplexity of the world? Last thing on this. We hear people talk about properties. What's the property of the Eiffel Tower? It's in Paris, it's made of steel, and it's more than 500,000 miles away from me. Do those three properties begin to describe the Eiffel Tower? I don't know. Look at the word in its primitivity, in its etymological root. P-R-O, per, P-E-R. Towards the all around. Per. Oh, I had to bring you this email per my supervisor's directive. Pro, I'm for that, not con. Proper. Towards the all around. Towards the controlling conduit. I haven't been to Paris. So what is that property to me? Am I really moving towards the all around of the Eiffel Tower if I am told that the Eiffel Tower is its location in Paris? By the same token, am I moving towards properly the Eiffel Tower if I'm told the exact number of miles between it and I? I would say no, because just saying that it is more than 568,724 miles from my current location does not tell me the fact that there is a saltwater ocean to cross, that there is an east coast to leap over, that I'll need this thing called an airplane, that it will have to land somewhere, that requires the expertise of a pilot, that needs someone to lock the doors when I go in, and be there to receive me when it lands. And then I'll need a way to find Paris once I'm across the ocean. None of those problems, none of those sites are even hinted at with the number 568,724. And so too, this property of steel, if steel is a property of the Eiffel Tower, then a scientist might say, or I might say, then give me some steel, give me a laboratory in Manhattan or in Nevada or somewhere that's not Paris, and let's discover some deep things about steel, how it can be compressed, transformed under different conditions at certain energy levels. And the more we discover about this volume of steel, the more we've learned by extension about the Eiffel Tower, right? Because steel being a property of the Eiffel Tower, whatever we know about steel, we know about the Eiffel Tower. It's a strange way of looking at the world and our relation to it and its relation to us. So rather than talk about properties, I like Mr. Yannaras' term perplexities, because he's putting not the cart in front of the horse, but the horse in front of the cart. Not proper, but perplex. Complex. Oh, there's an infinite number of details to any finite thing. We're not computers. That can go out the window. But I like the word plexus, solar plexus, groupings. But instead of proplexing or complexing, it's about the all-around groupings. All around what? All around what? As Mr. Yannaras says, we call the ontological question our perplexity, our all-around grouping about the reality or fact of being. And this is why he says about participation in existence. I haven't been to Paris. Therefore, I have not participated in the Eiffel Tower. Going onto Google does not participate in the Eiffel Tower, or does it? That's a later chapter on iconography in this book. And that's many videos hence. But forgive me, I don't think I was quite clear about complexity, property, and perplexity. But at least we've scratched the surface of the ontological question together. Have a good night.